Hey everyone, it's Michael. I hope you're doing well today, and I have a review here for a manga adaptation of an H.P. Lovecraft story. In this case, it's At the Mountains of Madness. It's adapted, kind of written, but not really, but kind of. I'll get to that later on. But mainly drawn by a fellow named Go Tanabe. Um, he's done a lot of these. He's done like 4 or 5 of these collections or single story adaptations. The sad part is this one comes in 2 volumes. In total, the books will cost you $40. $20 a book. It's totally not worth it. They're about 300 pages a piece, and they're published by Dark Horse, matter of fact. I love Dark Horse. I'm not an H.P. Lovecraft fan. However, the reason I read this was because I read I think it was the first collection that Tanabe did. It was called The Hound and Other Stories, and I think it was just 3 or 4 short stories adapted from Lovecraft to manga. And I read that like 4 years ago, and it was fantastic. It was one of my favorite horror books I'd ever read, one of the best horror comics ever read. I think it even won an award, if I remember correctly. It's fantastic. If you haven't read that one, definitely go out of your way to pick that up. Buy it physically, support this guy. Tanabe is such an amazing talent. Despite my feelings about this book, At the Mountains of Madness, I'm pretty sure this is the one, not Shadow over Innsmouth or whatever. I think this is the one that Del Toro wanted to make into a movie. And I'm going to tell you up front, before I even get to the book itself, I've never read this story by Lovecraft. I'm not a big Lovecraft fan, but I love the shorter his stories, the better they are. Once they get over like that 10 and 15 page mark, they become worse and worse. And even when they're at the 10 and 15 pages or less mark, they can be kind of rough. His style is not for me, which is why I was so surprised by the other Tanabe adaptation I did read, The Hound and Other Stories. If Del Toro made this into a movie with the story that I'm pretty sure my biggest issue with is Lovecraft's story, not Tanabe's adaptation, this movie would be laughed out of the theaters. It would bomb, it would make no money, and everybody would make fun of it for all of eternity. People make fun of so many things. So many things are considered to be ridiculously goofy. This would be one of those projects, if it's the correct one that I'm thinking of, that I think Del Toro wanted to make a movie of and had a script out there for. Anyway, the general plot of this book is very thin, like a lot of Lovecraft stuff. It doesn't have great characters, so Tanabe really doesn't have a whole lot to work with. He does his best with what he's given. I think Tanabe did a good job. I think if you love Lovecraft, and if you have read this short story, you'll probably love this. It's not as good as The Hound and Other Stories, but again, I blame that on Lovecraft, not Tanabe. I want to make that very clear. That's why I have to say it again and again. Basically, in 1931, you have a group of scientists and like geologists and whatnot going on an expedition to the Antarctic to find another crew that are out there in the Arctic somewhere, and they can't get in touch with them. Their sled dogs are apparently dead. The whole team they find are completely demolished and dead. They're almost decayed in a way that they're not sure how this even happened to these guys. And over nearby, they happen to find like what looks like what you and I would draw as a star on the ground, made out of like kind of snow and dirt and whatever. And they begin to dig into that, and they actually find some kind of alien creature. It kind of looks like those tube squishy things that are like underwater that you see SpongeBob use a lot in cartoons. But the top of them have a head that's shaped like a star. And the idea is that when you and I take our pieces of paper out and draw a star that kids draw and stuff, when they draw a picture of the sky, essentially, the idea is that that's where we got this from, was this alien being. Now, I did not realize, I had heard, a lot of the bigger Lovecraft stories. I think this might be his biggest novella, novel, whatever that he ever wrote. I know that some of them, like Call of Cthulhu and Shadow over Innsmouth and whatnot, are supposed to go more into his lore and mythology of Lovecraft that he developed, like the old ones, for example. I didn't realize this book was going to do that. However, despite the intrigue about what could have happened with those stories, this adaptation is very faithful in the sense that it barely gives you any detail or visuals of what happened in those days with the different civilizations before mankind. The books eventually become focused on kind of the history of mankind before mankind, or the history of the earth before mankind. You could say something like that. I wouldn't say it's good, though. By the probably 3/4 of the way through the first volume, I realized really bad this was beginning to get awful. And then volume 2 solidified the fact that this story was such a fucking mess. And it's not because it's a manga adaptation, it's because it's Lovecraft. This kind of storytelling that we have here is exactly why I don't like Lovecraft. It's almost something that people pretend to like. I'm convinced that's the case because people can't tell you a damn detail of his ridiculously complicated, super wordy, super big wordy stories half the time. I have like one friend in all of my horror community buddies that actually loves and respects Lovecraft and adores him, you know? And that's cool. He's a smart guy. The average hipster with a man bun, I refuse to believe understand Lovecraft because they can't take criticism for Lovecraft, or they act like they're taking it on behalf of him or something. This story is a mess. It's not satisfying at all, and the ending sucks. That's what I will tell you. Yeah, it kind of goes from the expedition story to kind of delving more and more into this almost more of the philosophical Prometheus movie style, without getting into the action and horror set pieces that Prometheus had. And I know that's a weird thing to draw it to, because it's really the origin, I would say the Lovecraft story is the origin, of the very famous John Carpenter remake of another movie called The Thing. If you told me that Joseph W. Campbell, who wrote, I believe his name was Joseph W. Campbell, who wrote the original story called Who Goes There, that became The Thing and The Thing from Another World before that, if you told me that Joe Campbell was not inspired by Lovecraft's story, I don't know if that came out a little bit after that or before it, but one or the other had to inspire the other because of what happens with this stuff. You'd be crazy not to think that one had not inspired the other. So this is very similar, even from the concept I told you, as The Thing. But The Thing is satisfying. Even the book that I don't like that much is satisfying. Even the black and white Thing from Another World movie is fairly satisfying. Hell, even the 2011 prequel is more satisfying than what this is. But there's a nice sense that the art, that's really great, by the way, that really accomplishes this feeling of isolation, not only for the characters themselves, but for us as the, audience. I feel like a lot of the time you'll have these zoom outs from where the characters are standing to the sky above it showing whatever they're looking at, and then above that to the earth out in space, and it's really eerie sometimes when it does that. And again, Tanabe's art is fantastic. That part of this is what makes all of these books worth picking up. I can't wait to delve into more of them. I think Cthulhu was just adapted recently, so I might buy that at some point, despite this one being bad, because I know when Tanabe touches something like The Hound and Other Stories, it's fantastic. It's some of the best H.P. Lovecraft work I've ever seen. And we've only had a few things adapted from Lovecraft's work to movies and whatnot. There's a reason for that. These would flop if they got adapted. And TV shows couldn't save them. None of that shit could save them. This would be the best place to adapt these things, and the fact that this turned out the way it turned out is such a shame to me, because I was looking so forward to this, despite having to buy 2 books to complete this story. The other thing is, too, I noticed with Tanabe, this is a little bit on him more than Lovecraft. There are some pages where you're getting narrations that are clearly the wordiness of Lovecraft, just copied and pasted right onto the pictures that we're looking at. However, when the different characters, who I really can't even name, I think one of them is named Danforth or something. I don't even know what the main character's name is. He looks like McReady from The Thing. Every time that our characters talk, they're clearly talking in a modern day vernacular. It's not the same voice that is clearly supposed to be the narration that we're seeing in the story that would be the main character's narration of what happened as he retells the past, right? It's very clear that's the case, that there's an issue here, a disconnect, if you will, between that dialogue versus the thoughts in that character's brain. So I don't like that as much. I think that's a problem. That's a Tanabe problem, not a Lovecraft problem. But Tanabe is trying to make this worthwhile and trying to make it worth reading, for that matter. So, say what you will. I don't really have anything else to say about it. The really only good thing about this is the art. All the snowy landscapes and whatnot are so beautiful to look at in here. When you're looking at some of the pictures of the past and like the alien origin stuff with the old ones, and that's not even a spoiler, by the way, because you get to the alien stuff so early in this book, that stuff is beautiful to look at. But I will say, too, one thing I noticed about this overall 2 volumes as a story versus The Hound and Other Stories, sometimes I would get pages where I couldn't understand what I was looking at. And I think it's because there's too much black and gray. I think there is. The art's beautiful. It's just sometimes it's a little bit much on the page where I can't really make out what I'm looking at. That could be a me problem. I don't really know. Let me know what you guys think down below, because I saw people complain about this on Goodreads. I just thought it was worth bringing up in case you guys have bad eyes or something. I don't even know if I have bad eyes. You know what I mean? But anyway. Oh, I do have one more complaint before I forget. So, like, I want to say, like, every 20 pages, every 10 pages, you'll have the characters discover something, and then we have a panel of them just standing there with their mouths hanging open, just looking at something. That particular picture is drawn over and over and over again, specifically with the main character. And it is so obnoxious to look at. Like, it is ridiculous to look at sometimes. Just them standing there with their mouth open. And I'm not kidding. It happens like 30 or 40 times in these 2 books collectively. I can't believe that it keeps happening, but it does, just so you know. So be ready at some point to crack over seeing that so much and laugh about it. Because I did. Even in the midst of the drama, of the tension of the story, I couldn't help it, but I cracked and laughed a couple of times because it got so absurd and common, especially in the 2nd volume of the book. Yeah, so that's also a Tanabe issue. But you couldn't transition from what we were doing to what we're now seeing without having that, so it's not really his fault. It's just the Lovecraft style. Again, I think if you're a hardcore Lovecraft fan at all, of the stories, of these mangas, you should check this out. If you love horror comics and horror manga, you should give this a shot. But I'd recommend getting it from a library if you can, before even dying to pay a cent for it. Because, dude, I just don't think most people are going to like this. Again, if it got made into a movie, it would be laughed out of the theater. It'd be laughed at before it even hit theaters, matter of fact, because of how ridiculous some of this is. I was hoping for a lot more in the current day setting in 1931 with alien stuff. Not like a big action aliens set piece with Sigourney Weaver. I'm not expecting something like that with a big shootout. But we didn't have more, and that's a Lovecraft problem. It's the kind of stuff I don't like about his work, because you never really get a payoff with his work most of the time. Have you ever noticed that? So, if you're a big Lovecraft fan, you'll probably love this. If you're a big, just in general, At the Mountains of Madness fan, you'll probably love this. The rest of us? Not really. If you're looking for lore about the old ones, you get quite a bit here. I don't know if it's as much or little compared to the novella, but still, you get enough where I thought some of that was interesting and a lot of it was just fucking stupid that I don't care about. So anyway, I'm a little cautious about some of these bigger books. I have another one that I haven't read yet. Again, I think there's like 5 of these Tanabe adaptations, but I don't know if I'm gonna love the other one I have in my collection. It's like almost 400 pages, I think, 350, something like that, and the cover looked like it had Frog King monsters or something, and I'm like, oh, that's usually where I diverge away from Lovecraft, is when he does stupid shit like that. So, I don't know. I always like the simple things like Dagon and, things like that. There was one, I think it was called The Mirror in the House, or The Picture in the House, or something, I think. Those are the kind of ones that I like from Lovecraft, because of the plot twists and whatnot, and the shortness of them, too, being really creepy. I think there was one about a cave that Lovecraft wrote that was really good, about like some kind of albino monster in the caves. That was a really good one with a good twist. But again, the shorter they are, I think he does better, and this is a long one, so just remember that if you go to pick this up. Anyway, what did you think about the At the Mountains of Madness novel, manga, novelization, adaptation? What are we calling this? I don't know what to call it. I'm just all over the place today. What do you think about it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you think it was great? Did you think it sucked? I'd love to hear all that down below too, especially for you folks out there who can compare this to the novel novella. Let me know what you think, which one's supposedly better according to you. I'd love to hear all that. Thank you all for watching, guys. God bless you all. Catch you later, and goodbye.